You're watching Forsaken Joe. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy the story. Let's begin.
I stood at the altar, barely able to breathe. This wasn't a wedding. It was a spectacle, a performance. The grand hall was buzzing with people who mattered. Pentagon officials, senators, donors, all of them hiding behind these perfectly composed, polite masks. And me? I was the trophy, the prize in a game I hadn't even known I'd signed up for. Cassie walked down the aisle, looking every bit the princess in her tailored ivory dress. I couldn't help but notice the way the fabric shimmered, probably worth more than my last 3 months' rent. Every eye in the room was fixed on her, and I was just there, waiting. She was the show, and I was the backdrop, a piece of her carefully curated world. When she finally reached me, it hit me, the weirdest, most jarring jolt, like a lightning strike to my skull. I flinched, like someone had just pulled the plug on a live wire. Then, like a floodgate opening, it all came rushing in. I heard her thoughts first. This time, it'll go better than when Mallory tried. And just like that, the second thought slammed in right after, Mallory's voice loud in my head. She took another one from me. I blinked, trying to shake it off, but I couldn't. This wasn't love. This wasn't even about her and me. This was about winning. And I was just the latest tool in their war. The crowd around me shifted, their faces full of expectation. I felt the weight of it all pressed down. I was caught in something far deeper, far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. This wedding wasn't the start of something beautiful. It was the beginning of a game. And I was a pawn. The reception was like something out of a movie, all polished floors and crystal chandeliers, the room stretching out in every direction with no end to the people in tuxedos and gowns. I didn't belong here. This world felt fake, every handshake too smooth, every smile too rehearsed. Conversations swirled around me, but it was like hearing the soundtrack instead of the words. Everyone was pretending, but I wasn't just hearing what they said. I was hearing what they really thought. Alan, Cassie's older brother, a rising senator who looked like a campaign poster come to life, extended his hand, his smile tight but polite. This guy's gonna fold the second pressure hits. I didn't flinch, though I should have. There it was, plain as day. He was already sizing me up, waiting for me to break. Scott, the younger brother, Navy intel officer with a smile that could sell ice to an Eskimo, clapped me on the back. He was warm, friendly, but inside, once he's in, I'll make my move. Like I was just another stepping stone, another piece of the puzzle he was trying to solve. And then there was Cassie, gliding through the crowd like she owned the place, looking flawless in her ivory dress. Her eyes met mine, and her smile was perfect, like we were the picture-perfect couple. But inside, her thoughts were colder. Keep him useful. Don't let him embarrass us. The words echoed in my head, sharp and clear. She didn't want me to fail, not because she cared, but because I was a tool. I was the trophy, but more than that, I was the key to whatever political machine her family had been building. It hit me in that moment. In the midst of all these important people pretending to be friends and allies, it wasn't about love. It wasn't about us. This was business. The Wentworths didn't do anything unless there was something to gain, and right now, I was that gain. The air in the room was heavy with expectation, and I fought to keep my face neutral. I shook hands, made small talk with people who I could tell were used to being flattered and treated like royalty. Everyone was looking at me, sizing me up. They knew who I was now, and I knew who they were. The thing was, none of them thought I had what it took to survive here. And maybe they were right. I could feel the weight of the eyes on me, the silent judgment in the air. I wasn't just out of my depth. I was drowning, and I didn't know how to swim. But there was no going back. This wasn't just some party where I could slip out unnoticed. I had married into this world, whether I was ready for it or not. Cassie was busy talking to someone else, her back to me, and for a moment, I let myself feel the isolation of it all. The noise around me faded, and I was left standing there, suddenly realizing just how far I'd fallen into something I didn't understand. But I couldn't leave. I was already too deep, too entangled. The sound of laughter pulled me back to the present. A few feet away, a group of people in high-end suits were talking shop, politics, power, and favors, like they were discussing the weather. One woman laughed a little too loud, her lips curling in a way that made her look like she was trying to keep a secret. I could almost taste the fake sweetness of it, like a cheap perfume. And sure enough, in her mind, I heard it. I wonder if he'll be enough to shut down the mess the general's been making lately. I didn't have time to process that one before I was being introduced to some donor who practically oozed importance. I shook his hand, smiling through it, but his thoughts slammed into me like a freight train. I don't trust him, but it's not personal. It's about the money. If he's smart, he'll play along. I could feel my stomach twist. This was the game, and I was already stuck playing it. Cassie caught my eye again from across the room, a faint smile playing on her lips. She was perfect, in control, making her rounds, as if nothing in this world was anything but hers to command. And maybe that's what stung the most. She was the one who'd invited me into this mess, and I was the one who had to make it work. Because if I didn't, I'd be out, and there would be nothing left but regret. I watched her for a moment, and her thoughts flickered in my head again. Keep him useful. Don't let him embarrass us. And just like that, the weight of her words hit me all over again. I wasn't just a trophy in her world. I was a tool, a weapon, a resource. I wasn't sure if that was the reality I'd signed up for. But now, there was no walking away. I was in this world, and there was no escaping it. Not now. Not ever. But there was something else too. Something that began to grow in me, deep down. A flicker of something I hadn't felt before. A quiet resolve. If I had to play this game, I'd play it better than they ever expected. And I'd make sure they didn't see me coming. We didn't even make it to the bedroom before Cassie's father, General Wentworth, and Alan called me into the study. The house was exactly what I'd expected, a fortress in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by more security cameras than I could count. It wasn't just for show, either. I could feel the weight of the place, the quiet, hidden power it held. I thought I might be able to breathe for a second, maybe steal a moment with Cassie to process everything that had just happened. But no, it was already clear I wasn't getting that kind of time. I stepped into the study and froze for a second. The room smelled like polished wood, cigar smoke, and old leather. It looked like a place where secrets were stored in books that nobody had ever read. Alan was leaning against the mahogany desk, arms crossed, eyes cold. The general sat behind the desk, his face a mask of quiet authority, like the kind of man who expected everyone in the room to jump at his command. They didn't need to speak, and they didn't. Alan just gestured to the chair across from the desk, and I sat. The general didn't waste any time. He slid a thick, leather-bound folder across the desk. I could hear the subtle rustle of paper inside as he spoke. Post-nuptial agreement. Standard procedure. His voice was low, clipped, like it was a matter of fact, not something up for discussion. You'll find it covers financial limitations, expectations, and security clearances. All of it, non-negotiable. I glanced at the folder. I could see the outline of pages inside, the weight of it, the fine print that was meant to trap you. The general continued, laying it all out with military precision. Cassie has a lot riding on this marriage. We expect total compliance. Anything else? Well, let's just say the consequences could be significant. I didn't need him to finish. I was already hearing the thoughts bouncing around in his head, loud and clear. Let's see if he has a spine, or if he's another soft one. That hit me harder than I'd care to admit. They had already decided what kind of man I was, and it wasn't the kind who would stand up to them. Alan's voice cut through the silence, cold and direct. If you fail, there's no safety net. Cassie's future isn't a charity, and neither is your place in it. Do you understand? I smiled, trying to hide the knot that was twisting in my stomach. I understand. Inside, I was already working through the angles. The way they were trying to pin me down without leaving room to breathe. It wasn't about partnership. It was about control. They wanted me on a leash, and they were testing to see if I would tug at it or lie down and take it. The general's eyes narrowed just a fraction, as if he knew exactly what I was thinking. But I didn't let myself blink. I kept my gaze steady. This was the game now, and I wasn't about to show them weakness. You'll be given the space you need, the general added, voice harder now. But don't mistake that for freedom. Keep your place, and this will go smoothly. I nodded again, a little slower this time, pretending to consider the weight of his words. The truth was, I was already planning how to flip this around, how to turn the tables, make it work in my favor. I had to. There was no other way forward. When the meeting finally ended, I walked out of the study and found Cassie waiting for me, leaning against the doorframe like she had been listening in. Her expression was unreadable, but I caught a glimpse of something flicker in her eyes. Maybe relief, maybe something else. Are you upset? She asked, her voice soft, but with a certain edge. She knew how these things worked. I shook my head, giving her the same smile I had perfected all night. No, I'm not upset. Just getting used to the way things work around here. Her lips twisted into a smile, but it wasn't quite real. Good, because this is just the beginning. I could feel her eyes on me as I turned away, and I knew she was watching me closely now. But in my head, I wasn't thinking about her. I was already 2 steps ahead, planning my next move. I didn't want to be the obedient pawn they expected me to be. I wasn't going to roll over. Not for them. Not for anyone. This was my fight now, whether I liked it or not. And I wasn't going to lose. I walked into the Wentworth family's weekly political operations meeting feeling like I was walking into the lion's den. The room was lined with heavy oak bookshelves, stacked with files, and the kind of expensive decor that made everything look like a money laundering scheme. Everyone was already gathered. Cassie, Alan, the general, a handful of other senior advisors, and a few people I recognized from the pack, all sitting around a long, dark wood table, their faces hard with business. The moment I sat down, the atmosphere shifted. It was like I'd entered a war room, not a family meeting. There were spreadsheets up on the projector, a rundown of campaign budgets, foreign contacts, and even scandal control tactics. These people spoke in terms of numbers and power plays, like generals planning a battle. Their language was cold, calculated. Politics was a chess game, and they had every move already mapped out. Alan was flipping through a file, one eyebrow cocked like he was already bored. The general was leaning forward, his hands clasped in front of him, his mind focused, but always observing. Cassie, ever the composed figure, sat quietly, eyes scanning the room, making sure everything was in its place. It was all about control, power, influence. And it wasn't until I opened my mouth that I realized just how much I was stepping out of line. There's a problem with the pack, I said, cutting through the conversation like a knife. The room went still, all eyes snapping to me. Alan's gaze flickered with irritation, and Cassie stiffened, her lips pressing together. The general didn't blink. He didn't move. He just looked at me like he was waiting to see if I was serious or if I was just another pretty face with no backbone. This digital outreach initiative is bleeding donors and votes. You're targeting the same audience you've been going after for the last 10 years, and it's not working anymore, I said. The words were out before I could stop them, but I wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not in front of all these people. The silence stretched out. I could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on me like a 1,000-pound boulder. Alan looked at me like I had 2 heads. Cassie's eyes widened just enough to let me know she wasn't expecting this. I didn't care. I wasn't here to play it safe. If I was going to survive in this world, I needed to make my mark. You're not going to get the traction you need if you keep playing to the same old crowd. You need to target non-traditional conservative voters, people who aren't as invested in the old party lines. Young voters, military families, first responders. You've got to engage them online. You need to tap into cultural influencers, people who actually have the audience. You need fresh blood. I let the words hang in the air, the room still frozen. The general's face remained unreadable, but I could hear his thoughts, just loud enough to catch them. This is risky. Does he even know what he's talking about? I pressed on. You have to be where the conversations are happening, not just where you want them to be. The general straightened in his chair, and I saw the sharpness in his eyes. For a second, I thought he might cut me down. But instead, he leaned back, folding his arms. 6 months, he said, his voice cold. You've got 6 months to prove it works. If it fails, you walk with nothing. Alan scoffed, already shaking his head. This guy's got a lot of confidence. Too bad it's misplaced. I ignored him, keeping my eyes locked on the general. I accept. There it was. The challenge. The trap. They expected me to fail. They wanted me to fall flat on my face so they could write me off as just another guy trying to ride on the Wentworth coattails. I knew that, but that was exactly what I needed. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. The room started to buzz again as the conversation picked up. Alan muttered something under his breath to the person next to him. Cassie was watching me closely, her eyes narrowed, calculating. She didn't like it, didn't like that I'd pushed for change. But she'd played her hand, and now I was playing mine. I didn't say another word as the meeting continued. But in my head, I was already planning. If I succeeded, I would earn their respect. If I failed, I'd have nothing left but the crumbling ruins of their expectations. 6 months. That was all I had. I wasn't afraid of failure, but I sure as hell wasn't going to make it easy for them. I walked into the PAC office for the first time, and I swear it felt like stepping into a time warp. It was in a strip mall just outside D.C., wedged between a pawn shop and a failed sushi restaurant. The place was dreary, with cracked linoleum floors and walls that had clearly never seen a fresh coat of paint. The furniture was a mix of mismatched chairs, half-broken desks, and outdated computers that probably hadn't been updated since the 90s. The staff was a mix of exhausted faces, people who looked like they had given up on this place years ago, just waiting for something, anything, to change. The air was stale, and the only real noise was the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. I took a breath, letting it settle in. This was it. This was ground zero, the starting point for everything I was about to do. I called a full team meeting, and when everyone shuffled in, I could feel the weight of their indifference. I didn't blame them. I would have been checked out too if I'd been stuck here for as long as some of them had. I know what you're all thinking, I said, standing in front of them. You're wondering if we're shutting this thing down. If we're just another forgotten operation. The answer is no. We're not going anywhere. We're not folding. We're going lean and aggressive. We're going to make this work, but it's going to be on our terms. I saw a couple of heads snap up, a little curiosity flickering in their eyes. But no one spoke, not yet. They were all waiting for me to prove I was serious. I've brought in a few people I trust. We're going to rebuild this from the ground up. Kenny was first to walk in. A sarcastic, data-obsessed genius who saw the world in numbers. He didn't even look up when he shook everyone's hand, too busy checking something on his phone. I'm here because this is either going to crash and burn, or we'll make history. Either way, I'm in. Next was Ria, a social media firebrand who could light up an entire campaign with one tweet. She was dressed in a graphic tee and ripped jeans, her arms full of tattoo sleeves that made her look like she had just walked off a protest stage. She flashed a smile and immediately sized up the room, as if she could already tell who would either sink or swim. Finally, Luis walked in. Tall, clean-cut, and always with the right words to say, Luis had a gift for fundraising. He could talk anyone into giving money, even if they had none to spare. He didn't need to say much, he just had that vibe. The kind of guy who could sell ice to an Eskimo. Once they were all settled in, I got down to business. We're targeting people no one's paying attention to: veterans, union conservatives, and parents in swing states. These are the people who've been forgotten. The ones who don't feel like anyone's listening to them. And we're going to get them talking, we're going to get them voting. I could see the team start to shift, lean forward just a little. It wasn't much, but it was something. I wasn't talking about running some safe, middle-of-the-road campaign. This was a full-on digital assault, and I wasn't afraid to get my hands dirty. We're going to push through social media, get influencers to back us, create viral content that speaks directly to them. If we want them to care, we have to speak their language, not the one everyone else is speaking. There was a silence, a beat. Then Kenny grinned and leaned back in his chair. All right, I like the sound of that. Ria raised her hand like she was in class. I'm all in, but we need a message. Something that cuts through the noise. I nodded, already running through ideas. We'll have that ready by tomorrow morning. We worked day and night, 14-hour days that blurred together. The pressure didn't ease up, but we kept pushing, each of us working at full speed, throwing everything we had into this new campaign. Kenny was running the data, Ria was setting up the digital content, Luis was dialing up donors, and I was driving it all, making sure we stayed on track. In the first month, things started to shift. We flipped 2 state donors who'd been on the fence for months, and our online engagement spiked. It wasn't much, but it was a start, a spark. People were beginning to listen, to notice. And then, one day, as we were wrapping up a long, exhausting meeting, I heard it. Hope. It was a soft thought, but it was there. One of the staff members was thinking it. One of the ones who had been here forever, the ones who had seen nothing but failure. For the first time, I didn't hear doubt or resignation in their head. I heard hope. It wasn't just the numbers starting to move or the donors we had landed. It was the feeling in the air. The mood in the office had shifted, and it felt like we were actually building something. It wasn't going to be easy, but it wasn't impossible either. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that we weren't done. Not by a long shot. This was just the beginning. The momentum we'd built felt like a freight train barreling down the tracks. Donors, small but vital, were starting to trickle back in. Online engagement was picking up, and for the first time since I'd taken over, it felt like the pack had a pulse again. The room buzzed with energy. People were working harder than ever, feeding off that new spark of hope. It was happening. We were making something out of nothing. Then the crash hit. It was a Friday afternoon, right as we were preparing to push out a new round of targeted ads. 1 minute, everything was running smoothly, and the next minute, nothing. The server went down. Hard. A couple of panic-filled hours later, we realized the worst of it. Donor data had been wiped clean. Not just corrupted. Wiped. It wasn't an accident. I paced in front of the screens, my mind racing. I could feel the weight of the room shift. People were starting to get nervous. The data was everything. We had spent weeks pulling together that list, building relationships, and now it was gone. But I wasn't panicking. I'd seen this kind of thing before. People didn't make this kind of mistake by accident. Someone was messing with us. It was too clean, too deliberate. I sent out an emergency text to my IT guy. He was sharp, had a way of getting things done even when it felt like the world was falling apart. I didn't wait for a response. I knew he'd be working on it as fast as possible. Meanwhile, I did the only thing I could. I kept everyone calm. And that's when Cassie's sister Mallory showed up. She glided into the office, wearing a tight smile that barely concealed the faintest hint of satisfaction. She moved slowly, like she was taking in the wreckage. I could feel her eyes on me the second she walked in. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice dripping with concern. Too much concern. She was playing her role, pretending to care about the disaster unfolding. But the thought that slipped through her mind was crystal clear. Let's see how he handles this. I didn't flinch. Instead, I gave her a tight smile, trying to project calm even as everything inside me was still on fire. "We're working through it. The team's on it." "Good. Just let me know if you need anything," she said, her tone casual, almost too casual. It was like she wanted to keep the pressure on, but she wasn't showing her hand yet. I could almost hear the wheels turning in her head. If he falls apart, I'll be there to catch the pieces. But if he doesn't, well, I'll be right here anyway, waiting for my moment. I kept my cool, nodded, and watched her leave. The second she was gone, I made a few calls. My IT guy was good, but I knew better than to trust this was an accident. The backup systems were solid, triple redundancy, just like I'd made sure we had. It took us 48 hours, but we were back online, stronger, faster, and more secure than ever before. The data was restored, and we had a system in place to ensure nothing like this could happen again. I took the outage and spun it into an opportunity. We launched a donor loyalty campaign, played the "we're back, better than ever" angle, and made sure every email and post we sent out conveyed the message that we were committed to our supporters and their data security. It wasn't just about fixing the issue. It was about showing the donors that we were transparent, that we could be trusted. The next few days, things felt almost normal again. But then the other shoe dropped. I got a call late one night from a journalist I knew, a friend who owed me a favor. "I've got a tip," she said, voice low and urgent. "Someone's trying to link you to foreign political consultants. The leak's coming out tomorrow morning." My gut dropped. I didn't need to ask who was behind it. Mallory's fingerprints were all over it. She was pulling every string she could to get me out of the picture. I could hear her voice in my head. Let's see how he handles this. I wasn't about to let her win. I moved fast, making a few calls of my own. The smear campaign was a thinly veiled attempt to tie me to a shady foreign connection, but it wasn't going to stick. Not on my watch. The journalist had a clear bias, and she wasn't just reporting. She was playing a part. She had been given the story to plant, not to expose it. It was all part of Mallory's plan to discredit me, to drive a wedge between me and the Wentworths. I nipped it in the bud before it even had a chance to breathe. I went public with the truth, an official statement that debunked the accusation and called out the anonymous smear for what it was. By the time the story was supposed to break, it was already dead in the water. But I wasn't done yet. Now I knew how Mallory played. I could hear every step she took, and I wasn't going to let her, or anyone else, take me down that easy. There was a certain satisfaction in knowing the game was just beginning. I was already 3 moves ahead. And as for Mallory, I was ready for whatever she threw next. She wasn't the only one who knew how to play dirty. The gala was everything I hated about politics. It was held at one of those grand, old D.C. venues, where the chandeliers looked like something out of a history textbook and the walls practically screamed old money. The crowd was a mix of the political elite, senators, donors, press, and their polished smiles. Everyone pretending to be friends, but I could already feel the undercurrent of competition, ambition, and secrets bubbling beneath the surface. I was supposed to be playing the part of the dutiful new husband, mingling, smiling, nodding at all the right moments. Cassie was already in her element, floating around, shaking hands like she was born to do it. But something was off. There were whispers, quiet murmurs I could barely catch between the laughter and clinking glasses. Then the lights flickered. A hush fell over the crowd, followed by a loud click, the sound of a projector firing up. Everyone turned toward the screen at the front of the room, expecting the usual PowerPointed speech or slick presentation. But what flashed on the screen wasn't a campaign strategy. It was a list of internal Wentworth family files, finances, private emails, donor information. And then the voice, Devin, an intern-turned-activist who'd been working for us a few months ago, shouted over the rising panic in the room. "Transparency," he screamed, voice shaking with righteous anger. "It's time for the people to know what's really going on behind closed doors." The room was thrown into chaos, people scrambling to figure out what the hell was happening. The screens were showing everything. Confidential documents that, if leaked, could bring down half the political world. But as Devin raged on about corruption, something felt wrong. His eyes darted nervously, his shaking hands gripping the microphone like it was his only lifeline. And then it hit me. Mallory's voice, clear as day in my head. "Let's see if he can take the fall." I froze. It wasn't just Devin. This wasn't some rogue intern making a stand. It was all set up. The chaos, the accusations, the files, they were all part of Mallory's plan to make sure I didn't last. I didn't wait another second. I grabbed my phone, typing out a quick warning to security. "Devin's not in control. Mallory's behind this. Get her tablet." As the crowd started to murmur louder, shifting in panic, I walked straight to the front, locking eyes with Cassie, who looked like she'd just seen a ghost. She was frozen, too, but I could see the recognition in her eyes. She knew. Devin was still ranting, oblivious to the chaos he was causing, but now it wasn't about him. It was about the mess Mallory had just unleashed. "Get him off the stage," I said quietly to one of the security officers who'd rushed in. "Now." The officer hesitated for a second, his eyes scanning the room before he nodded and moved toward Devin. But before he could reach him, security personnel were already on Mallory. They approached her quietly, almost too quietly, as if they knew what they had to do without anyone catching on. Mallory wasn't fighting them, but I could see it in her eyes. The frustration, the fury, and the realization that the game she thought she had control of was slipping out of her grasp. Devin didn't go down quietly. He screamed at the top of his lungs, accusing everyone in the room of corruption and hypocrisy. "You're all part of it. They're hiding the truth." He tried to push away from the officers grabbing him, but they were already pulling him toward the back. The room was still in chaos, but the focus had shifted. It wasn't just about the scandal anymore. It was about who had orchestrated it. I didn't say a word, just watched as Devin was dragged away, ranting about being framed. Security had managed to get a hold of Mallory's tablet, and it didn't take long to see what was on it. The files on the screen? They hadn't been hacked. They were planted. Mallory had sent them to Devin herself, and I was the one who was supposed to look guilty. As the last of the mess was cleaned up and the crowd began to murmur about what had just gone down, I felt someone's gaze on me. It was Evelyn, Cassie's mother. She'd been watching everything unfold from the side of the room, and now, her eyes were fixed on me, sharp and calculating. I didn't look away. There was something in her expression, something new. I didn't know what it was yet, but I wasn't going to find out by staring at her. I turned and walked toward the exit, Cassie beside me, the air still thick with the remnants of the chaos. I could hear her voice, low, angry in my ear, but I didn't stop walking. "You just let Mallory dig her own grave, didn't you?" Cassie asked, her tone sharp. I didn't answer right away. "She's been playing her own game. I just made sure it didn't end up as mine," I said, not looking at her. But inside, I was already shifting gears. Evelyn's gaze had told me everything. Mallory had just made a critical mistake, and now I was one step closer to winning this war. Devin was arrested, Mallory was exposed, and in the end, no one would question who had been behind it all. I didn't have to say anything to the press. Not yet. The truth was already starting to surface. And as for Mallory, she had just shown her hand. The numbers came in, and they were everything I needed to prove this wasn't some fluke. The PAC's quarterly report was a slam dunk, record-breaking fundraising, key endorsements from influencers I had handpicked, and viral engagement that got everyone talking. We'd turned the corner, and it wasn't just about making noise anymore. We were making waves. Real ones. At the next Family Strategy Council, I stood at the front of the room, eyes locked with the general, Alan, Cassie, and the rest of the higher-ups. It was like everything had led to this moment. The room was quiet, all attention on me. I could feel their eyes, expectant, calculating, but more curious than skeptical this time. I didn't hesitate. I stood tall, clear and sharp. "We've surpassed expectations this quarter," I said, voice steady, cutting through the stillness. "Not just in fundraising, but in reach, in momentum. Our digital campaign is working. We're connecting with people who've been overlooked for years. And we've only just begun." The general didn't flinch. He just leaned forward, fingers tapping on the table. "I'm listening," his thoughts said loud and clear. And then, when I finished, he spoke. "You've outperformed," he said, his voice measured but not dismissive. "We expected you to fail. You've proved us wrong." Alan's thoughts weren't as gracious. Might not be dead weight after all, he thought, his eyes narrowing just slightly as he glanced at me. There was no praise in his tone, but I could hear it in his mind. He wasn't ready to admit it out loud, but he knew. This had worked. "I've got a proposal," I continued, letting the silence stretch between us. "I'm ready to take on more responsibility. I'm ready for a real role, a formal one. Director of Voter Engagement for the family's national operation. I want to make this work, not just for the PAC, but for all of us." The room was still. Everyone was waiting, watching me like they were trying to figure out if this was a test or a power play. I wasn't going to back down. Not now. The general looked at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "I can respect that," he said, voice low, the approval lingering in his words. "It's a big move, but it's yours if you want it." Alan barely even blinked, but I could feel him acknowledging the shift in power. For the first time, I wasn't just the guy who'd married into this. I was the one calling the shots. There was still one thing left to settle. I couldn't leave the room without making sure I had more than just a title. "I'll take the role," I said, "but I want one thing. Scrap the original post-nuptial agreement. If I'm going to sit at the table with you, I'm not going to be owned. I want a partnership, not a leash. I want a seat, not just permission." There was a pause. Cassie's eyes flickered toward me, sharp, but I didn't look at her. This wasn't about her anymore. Evelyn, Cassie's mother, broke the silence. Her gaze was cold, calculating, but I could see the shift in her, too. "Fine," she said, voice steady. "But understand this. You're a part of this family now. We don't just give anything away. We expect loyalty." I didn't flinch. Understood. The deal was made. As Evelyn gave me a nod of approval, it felt like something clicked into place. This wasn't just a family anymore. This wasn't just a political operation. For the first time, I wasn't just an outsider looking in. I was at the table. I was part of the game. Real power. Real influence. The door was wide open now. I wasn't beneath them. I was sitting with them. And I wasn't going anywhere. Evelyn called me to her private garden terrace, and I knew exactly what it meant. This was her domain, her unofficial throne room, where the real power was wielded in whispers and glances. The terrace overlooked the vast expanse of the Wentworth estate, its perfectly manicured lawns a sharp contrast to the raw ambition I could feel in the air. The garden was calm, serene, but beneath it, there was always a current of something sharper, more calculating. And that's exactly how she liked it. I stepped out into the garden, my eyes locking with hers as she motioned for me to sit. The way she studied me, it was different now. There was no pretense, no veiled judgment. She was seeing me for what I was. A player. An equal. "You've passed every test," Evelyn said, her voice smooth but carrying weight. "It's time to take on the next challenge." I nodded, waiting. She wasn't the type to beat around the bush. "I'm putting you in charge of the Wentworth Foundation," she continued, her gaze steady. "The charity wing. It's high-profile, public-facing, and it holds weight. It's more than just a PR arm. It's about influence." I leaned forward, ready to hear the rest. I didn't have to ask for specifics. I'd been watching the foundation for months. I knew its potential. "You'll be expected to make a real impact," Evelyn said, her eyes narrowing. "Not just with the public, but with our donors, the people we need in our corner. Get the media on our side. Get the right politicians on our side. The weight of her words hit me, but I didn't feel intimidated. I felt ready. I had a plan already forming in my mind. I know exactly how we're going to do it, I said, sharp and confident. We'll fund projects that people care about, real, emotional initiatives. Scholarships, veterans programs, family support. We'll put faces on these causes, show the stories that make people feel something. When they feel something, they act. Evelyn didn't smile, but her eyes shifted, calculating. And how will that help us? The media loves a good story. If we focus on veterans, military families, the ones who sacrifice but often get overlooked, that's where the bipartisan support comes from. It won't just be about the right or left. It'll be about a cause everyone can rally behind. I paused, letting the words sink in. We win hearts. We win influence. We position ourselves as the people who do more than just talk. Evelyn sat back, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She studied me for a moment, then gave the slightest nod of approval. That's the kind of thinking we need. The next few weeks flew by as I dived into the work, pushing the foundation forward. The scholarship for kids of enlisted military families was the first thing we launched, a small initiative at first, but one with huge emotional appeal. It didn't take long for the media to pick up on it. We got coverage across the board, bipartisan, positive press that made the Wentworth name seem like it stood for something real, something good. The donors followed, too. The ones who had stayed on the sidelines began to show interest. The PAC's numbers soared, but this was a different kind of power, the kind that was built on perception, on hearts and minds. And we were playing that game better than anyone else. Then Mallory tried to sneak back into the picture. She showed up at one of our family events, looking all too polished, wearing that mask of, "I'm sorry, I was wrong," that she had perfected. The apology was there, buried under layers of fake concern. She walked up to me, smiling like we were old friends. "I've been thinking," she said, her tone sweet but edged with something colder, something calculating. "Maybe it's time we put the past behind us. I'd like to help. You know, with the foundation." I didn't hesitate. I didn't need to. I'd seen this before. She wasn't sorry. She was just looking for a way back in, hoping I was stupid enough to forget how she'd tried to sabotage me before. I looked her straight in the eyes and didn't flinch. "Thanks, but no thanks. We're doing just fine without you." Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, just long enough for me to see the truth in her eyes. She wasn't part of the plan anymore. She'd made her play, and now she had to live with it. Mallory opened her mouth like she was going to argue, but I cut her off. "You're not a part of this. Not anymore." I walked away without looking back. I wasn't naive anymore. I had learned fast, had sharpened my instincts. I was armed, experienced, and prepared for whatever came next. As I stood there, watching her retreat, I realized something important. I wasn't just surviving in this world. I was reshaping it. I had a seat at the table now, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. Not Mallory. Not anyone. 6 months had passed, and I'd climbed higher than I thought possible. I was no longer just a figurehead in the Wentworth machine. I was running the national engagement campaigns, steering the foundation, and sitting at the senior family table with the very people who had once looked at me like I was just a stepping stone. Now, I watched them check my expressions before they spoke. Even Alan, who used to dismiss me with a single glance, kept his thoughts guarded. He knew what I could do now. They all did. Dinner that night was at the usual long, polished table in the Wentworth Estate's grand dining room, the place where every conversation felt like a high-stakes negotiation. Cassie sat across from me, her eyes glimmering in the candlelight. It wasn't the same look I'd gotten when we first met, no longer that mix of ambition and uncertainty. Now, there was something different, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. "Honestly," she said, breaking the silence between bites of salad, "I didn't think you'd make it." She paused, then glanced up, meeting my eyes with a sort of cautious curiosity. "You're not what I expected." I didn't react right away, letting the words sink in. She had always underestimated me. Everyone had. But now I was in control. I raised my glass, feeling the weight of the moment, of everything I had built and taken. "Here's to unexpected outcomes." Cassie's lips curled into a smile, but it wasn't the cold smile of a politician anymore. It was softer, more genuine, though still careful. She took a sip of her wine, her gaze shifting to her family, then back to me. I could hear her thoughts now. No more contempt, no more judgment. He's not the weak link anymore. He's a player. There was caution, but also something else I hadn't felt from her before: respect. The table around us had quieted, the other family members listening more closely to the rhythm of conversation. It was subtle, but it was there. Everyone was waiting for me to speak now, not just the general or Alan. For the first time, I wasn't just here by default. I had earned my place. I didn't just marry into power. I took it. I had walked into this world with nothing but a plan, and now I was the one rewriting the story. As the dinner went on, the dynamics had shifted. The conversations were more strategic, and I was no longer some outsider trying to keep up. I was in it, and I knew, deep down, that no one, least of all Cassie, could push me aside anymore. For the first time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, and it wasn't because I was married to her. It was because I had taken control of my own future.